Is this thing working? Hey, buddy. Anybody out there? Sorry, I'm a little bit late. It's Veteran Guerrilla Radio. We haven't been on for a while. And here we are at the fundraiser dinner. Tons of people out here. So, Jim Scott, my good buddy Sears Taylor, Vietnam veteran. Colonel Dave, LaFines, Sean T. LaFines. That fellow there, World War II veteran. Federal Corrections guy. There's Diane Watts. This is my good friend Terry Hack. Federal Corrections in Afghanistan. There's only about 24 of you, right?
Hey, you betcha, yeah.
Hello. Bob, what are you doing?
Oh, I'm looking for an Equitas t-shirt.
It's my good friend Bob Sutherland. This guy helped me get into the Veterans Transition Program.
How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing very well.
And as I am? Beautiful shirts?
Yeah, we got a whole selection of shirts here. We got brand new shirts. Can you hold up one of these, please? There it is. That's the new shirt for 2016. We wanted to take us back to court, break a big promise. There's our new shirt.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to be buying 3 of these.
Yeah? Thank you.
So, come on, you other 2 veterans.
So everybody out there, see that? We got an airborne guy here, and he's buying a whole bunch of these shirts.
Come on, challenge to you guys, buy a shirt.
So come on. So he still got all the old ones too, but the first original ones. The green one and the maroon and black one. So anyway, they're just allowing to have some time to do the, what is this? A auction. So everyone's putting in bids for stuff. There's some cool stuff. Maybe we can in the future go around and everybody could do an online digital call-in sort of thing for doing an auction. I don't know. So any minute now, it looks like they're going to get going in there. And I'm just going to let them run the show here because it's their show. This is the Equitas Society. I'm just one of the plaintiffs, but these guys are the ones that created this whole thing, coordinated it all, made it possible. What's that? Is that the Skunk Works coins?
Yeah, these are
Can you show one? It's from our good friend Joe Green. The Skunk Works coin, limited edition coins. They're doing an auction on that. Don Hogue there. Don, you're live on Veteran Guerrilla Radio.
Oh my gosh.
So,
You want me to do my raffle?
4,000 or 5,000 vets watch this show.
All right.
So we're going to have you on there. Yeah, everybody say hi. Brian Archer of Citadel K9.
Thank you very much. You're looking good. Are we on live?
Yeah, we are
Hello,
on Veteran Guerrilla
Canada.
Radio.
Hello.
How's the dog business?
The dog business is great, and to all the veterans overseas, we're thinking of you.
All right. Brian Archer is one of the original guys who's helped start the Equitas Society. Diane. What's there? So, is that going to be low enough? I just got to figure out what I'm going to do here once they start doing the show. So, they're going to start any second now. Someone sitting right here? Yes? Is that low enough that it's not blocking? It's good? So everybody, how are you doing out there? Craig Fox, did you have a good Remembrance Day? No, you're not. That's Jerry Lenoski, Vice President of the Equitas Society.
You got me on.
Veteran Guerrilla Radio.
Please be seated.
There's Mark and Donna. Say hi. Hello. All our friends out there, all our support. There's Mike Ducharme from out in Winnipeg. Brad Whittle. Served with Brad there. Afghanistan, 1 CR. We're gonna get going.
It's my pleasure now
Okay.
to introduce the president, the visionary, the leader of Equitas. Please welcome Jim Scott. Well, thank you. Can everybody hear in the back there? Can Michelle hear me? Great. My name right now is Don Sorokin. He's really the brains behind this whole process. He's in Quebec City. He's the lead lawyer for Miller Thomson. And he's not going to be able to be here today, so he's got his whole team out in Quebec City doing another event. And he asked if I would just give a legal update. So now Greg here, who is one of the lead counsel on this project, is going to sit here and just roll his eyes as I tell you about law. So I'm not going to. So I'm just going to walk you through what happened here in Canada, because this is a really big event as far as Canadian values are concerned, and it's actually the people in this room that has funded this whole process. We keep on coming back to the same 120, 150 people. Aaron keeps on pumping out some new t-shirts, and between that, we've taken on the federal government. The federal government spent about $1 million on us so far. And the Equitas Society has to underwrite the disbursement costs, right, Greg? That's right. And any potential losses that we take, because the government can come back after us and say, okay, you fought hard, now you pay hard. So the individual soldiers could not be involved in paying. So the Equitas Society was set up to underwrite this movement. It's a risky business because we've won so far, but that doesn't mean we're going to win the whole way through, because actually, as Greg would know, this was an uphill battle. The government has the right to do as they please in this particular case. And it was only by extraordinary legal wrangling and being on the right side of a process that the courts have actually given us one. But just to go back here, what happened, and I'm going to go back a little bit in history, because our whole case is a history lesson for the courts. Would you agree? It really is saying to the courts, there is Canadian values that we don't care what piece of paper was written when, do not apply to Canadians. And that is what the courts said. You have won. You have won the right to make your case go forward, because we believe that Canadian values are more important than signatures on little pieces of acts and so on. So what started? 1914. Workers, at the very first time in Canada, were given disability pensions if they were hurt at work. It started in Ontario, came right across Canada. Then World War I started. Canada put about 600,000 people into theater. 67,000 died. 250,000 came back wounded. The Canadian government had a 50% death or casualty rate, and we only had 13 million people in Canada. What do? Under the old way, it's just too bad, so sad, don't show up for work again. So in 1919, the Canadian government said, we're going to start what we call the Pension Act, and we're going to take care of these boys and girls. And that's when it started. That was the Canadian value. Now, the reason that they felt that they had to do that is in order to get Canadians to go over to the foreign theater, a promise was made that if you shall die, the government will take care of your family. And if you shall come back injured, we will take care of you. And when you die, we will take care of your family. And that was repeated over and over and over again. And that's why 67,000 people went to their death in World War I, because of this belief that something was going to occur should they die. And for 67,000 people, they paid the ultimate sacrifice. World War II came along. We put 1.1 million soldiers into combat. Only 44, and it's not only, but 44,000 died. Medical procedures were getting better. 54,000 came back wounded. We had Korea, we had the peacekeeping role. 2001, we find ourselves in Afghanistan because of 9/11. At first, we were in the north, and Mark will talk about this. 2005, the Canadian government decides, each and every party, that they're going to help veterans by creating a thing called the new Veterans Charter. And instead of giving pensions like they had since 1919, they're just going to give them lump sum money, let them buy a house, start a business, get on with life. Sounded great. Every single person voted for it. It was because they thought they were doing the right thing. 2006, the Americans go to Iraq. We have to go down to southern Afghanistan, and certainly Mark will talk about what happened to the Canadians when we went to southern Afghanistan. But quite frankly, there wasn't enough of us, and the casualties started to mount up. So we have 157 that died, but many came back injured. In fact, many Canadians did multiple tours of duty, 5 tours of duty. So the chances of you getting injured became a multiple of how many times you were required to go back to the same country that you were just at a while back. In 2006, the new Veterans Charter, right in the middle of a war, comes into effect. And what it does is it says there will no longer be lifetime pensions, but there'll be one-time lump sum payments. And people could start figuring out that this would not equal what they would need to go onwards. 2010, all of a sudden we start to hear of all the cases, and there's a number of cases in this room, that there was disproportionately low settlements for people that had horrific injuries. So in 2011, Miller Thomson, the law firm which Greg was at, agreed to represent the soldiers through the legal challenge of the new Veterans Charter pro bono. That means without cost. And so far they've put about $1 million of billing into this at no cost. But they said, we can't underwrite it. We can't put cash into it. So you'll have to start a society to put money in. So that's why we started the Equitas Society, and you are, for all intents and purposes, at our annual AGM. The people here have funded it. So 2011, we make a call out into the public domain for people's cases. Between 2011 and 2012, about 200 files come forward. Greg handles just about all of them. And they are people that are being disadvantaged by being injured during the Afghan war and having settlements under the new Veterans Charter. From that, we sat in a room, Greg was there, and we picked 6. We picked 6 people to represent the rest of the Canadian Armed Forces. And why did we pick them? They didn't have the most egregious injuries. Last year, I brought you Billy Kerr and his wife. Billy Kerr is missing 2 legs and 1 arm. It's not the state of the injury, it's whether or not they have the emotional ability to fight for 10 years and to be criticized and to be cross-examined and to be taken into the media for 10 years. So we looked at behind the scenes and we picked 6. And we have a number of them in, if you could stand, Aaron was picked. Mark, who's our guest speaker. Gavin in the back, please stand, and Dan, my son. So, yeah, Brian's on the advisory council. And now, of our 6 representative plaintiffs, at least 3, if not 4, would not be here now if it wasn't for extraordinary medical care. but now we have the issue of having them move on with their lives. We filed basically a lawsuit. We're trying to certify it as a class action lawsuit. The government, in their right, said, I think we've dealt with this issue before. There is no right to sue the government if you're a soldier. The Crown Liability and Proceeding Act prohibits it. So this became a fairly high test when they came in with boxes and boxes and boxes of court decisions, said, you can't do this. So they put a motion to strike our action, said there's nothing there. And we went to court, and they said there was no case to answer. And they didn't know about Don Strachan, and he's not here right now, so I can speak very well of him. But Don knew that the courts are more than contract dispute settlers. They will look at cases of national importance and of national issues. And they did. And we, in 2012, we filed our case. In 2013, the courts heard, the Supreme Court of Canada. And our position was there's a social covenants that was first promised to all that served in the Canadian Armed Forces in the First World War. A promise that continued to all those that have served their country from there on. The position of these historic promises are given constitutional protection status by the principles related to the honor of the Crown, which is, if the Crown is bound to act honorably in respect to its solemn obligations. So is it a solemn obligation to take care of the wounded? In response, the government said, the honor of the Crown does not extend to the relationship between the federal government and members of the Canadian Armed Forces. As a result, the federal government has no fiduciary responsibility to members of the Canadian Armed Forces. And moreover, the government is entitled to save money where they see fit. That the courts cannot interfere with that right, and that if the soldiers want to defeat the government, they must do so at the polls. So I remember when that statement was made, saying to Don, did I just hear that? And he said, yes, and that's been signed off. That is the position of government. So a ruling was rendered by the Supreme Court of BC, and it says in the very first line, this action is about promises the Canadian government made to men and women injured in the service to their country, and whether it's obligated the country to fulfill those promises. And what it said was, there's a case to be answered. You can go to court. The government then appealed. So in October 2013, they filed the appeal, and they used the same arguments that they have no duty of care. For a whole year, we just went back and forth in the newspapers accusing each other of this, that, and the next thing. In December 2014, the appeal was heard, and the same positions by government was taken. However, this time it was widely covered in the media, and Canadians were appalled at what they heard. As a result of that backlash, in January 2015, less than 30 days later, there was a new Veterans Affairs Minister called Aaron O'Toole. And he immediately reached out to Equitas. And it's called the Equitas lawsuit, even though it's really the Miller Thomson lawsuit. The Department of Justice lawyer was fired for his positions that he had taken in court. And outside counsel was brought in from a Toronto law firm to deal with the issue. Very, very quickly, progress was made. Within days and weeks, there was no difference of opinion from those in the room on either side of the table. Things had to get fixed. In May 2015, the NDP, Finn Donnelly, who I've asked to come here, he thinks we don't like him. He actually did a really good job. He had a motion in the House of Commons that there's a sacred obligation to soldiers and there is a relationship between the government and its members of the Canadian Armed Forces, and every single member of Parliament rose to agree. As a result of that, the Canadian government asked if they could abandon their case before the courts. We said yes. So we could have filed that in paper, but we decided as a courtesy of the courts to explain where we had got in our relationship. We went before the administrative judge for the appellant court of BC, and we said the government of Canada wishes to withdraw its case. And the judge said, no, you're not going to. There's too many issues here. There's some legal issues that had already been argued before the courts, and he knew that there was an election coming up. He says, I will keep custody of this file during the period of this transition of the government. August 2015, the election was called. The Liberals campaigned on dropping the legal action and restoring the lifetime benefits. Many people, including Brian, where are you, campaigned and helped. In October, the Liberals won, and great things happened, like Harjit Sajjan, who's a big supporter of this Equitas movement, became the defense minister. Ken Hare became the Veterans Affairs Minister. A mandate letter was made public that said that we are going to do everything that we promised during the election. We thought we had won. However, the phone didn't ring. And you know when you kind of feel that something's not going right, and then one day goes by, and 1 week goes by, and 1 month goes by, and there's no call from your new friends. So we reached out to them, and we said, hey, new friends, when do we get a chance to shake hands and have a few drinks? And they said, come to Ottawa, we have a message for you. So we all went. And we went into a room, and the minister basically was put to 2 conditions to settle. One, that you put a timeline for your pensions, and one, you put a timeline for social covenants that locks in these rights that everybody stood for in Finn Donnelly's motion. He thanked us very much, left, and the lawyer who was previously fired got up and said, we'll see you in court. We are going back to court. So we had to inform the appellate court of BC that we were going back. And we met, and the judge said, I'm disappointed to see you, but I am very glad you took my counsel when I decided that you should not abandon this case earlier, because you had the right to abandon it, and I'm glad that you agreed not to, because I have now kept custody of this file, and I read the newspaper. And we said, we want to enter into evidence the fact that everybody's making these promises, but nobody is coming to court to say those promises mean anything. And he says, yes, this would be different to hear new evidence, because our job is normally to hear the evidence of the previous trial. We spoke about this yesterday as a panel, and you need not speak. Don Strachan said, no, I always speak. They said, thank you very much. They said to the Canadian government, now you tell me why we should not hear those promises made during the last election as a reason that you are doing this double standard, once in public, once in the courts. There's a different story. They argued, said it's not your role, so on and so on. They said, thank you very much. We've made a decision. We're now going to hear that evidence as new evidence and rendering our decision. Also said, prepare yourself for an abuse of process ruling. We read the newspapers. I would suggest that you settle this case. I write very slowly. We all write very slowly. But if we have to come with a ruling, I think you know what it's going to be. They immediately put a press release out that they support soldiers. I said to the press secretary there, I says, did you not just hear what the judge said to you? Stop it. Stop saying one thing in court and one thing in public. You are starting to piss these guys off. 2016, October 2016, Dominic LeBlanc is assigned to all federal files of litigation, which is a good thing. 45,000 files backlogged by the Department of Justice now. We reached out to him. Truly, we have to go through this court ruling. 2016, where's Brian? Over there. Brian and myself were asked to go back to Ottawa to speak before the Standing House Committee on Finance regarding should there be more money for pensions. It wasn't the fact that we talked, it was the fact that everybody that spoke to us said, you guys need to step it up. We're having some internal issues here. You need to get going. You guys have gone to sleep. So we are going to wait for that court decision. If it's good for us, we are really going to get yappy. If not so much, we're going to appeal it. But I do think that the courts have signaled their direction, but you can never be sure, right? Yes, we don't want to preempt them with something in the media because you just never know. But we do feel that the courts are sympathetic to this cause. And so for this fundraiser, I really thought was going to be a wind down party. Unfortunately, it is a time to bring more money into the Treasury because Supreme Court battles, and if we don't go to the Supreme Court, the government will. Of Canada is expensive. So that is where we're at. That's the legal update. I hope I didn't nail it. But I would like to thank everybody that is helping with this. So we've had the representative plaintiffs, but I would like everybody with Equitas, the directors and on the advisory council, just to stand, because these are people that are putting their heart and soul behind this to help a cause which is very, very big. So if everybody could just stand, Wayne needs to stand too. Okay, thank you very much. And Jim just wants to say something. Then I'd like to invite, or we'll have Gordon invite Diane Watts up, because Diane has very much been kept abreast of this. She is our representative in Ottawa. I think she has something to say about where the position of government and their party is on this matter. Jim, sir.
Hi, I'm Jim Garrison. I'm on the board. When my wife got me involved, she was on the beginning board. At the beginning, when I first heard about Equitas, I thought, boy, this will catch on with the country. What Canadian wouldn't want to be with you here tonight for what we're doing? It's amazing. It hasn't caught on. Which is why it's so important for all of you to come back each year and support us. You're our support. Other Canadians would like to be here, give support, but they're not. It's all of you that are here. So thank you so much for coming back again every year. There's a saying, the mouse that roared, that's what this little group is. It's affecting the whole country, but it's you here that come out and support us each time. Not other people across the country, just you. So thanks very much.
You've now heard from a pair of Jims. Thank you very much for that update. I'd now like to invite our Member of Parliament, Diane, who is busy making notes. Please welcome the Member of Parliament for Surrey Whitehall, Diane.
Well, thank you very much, and I know everybody really appreciates the update and how many years it has taken to go through this process. And as we heard, there's been ministers that have been changed and lawyers that have been fired. And I have a lot of respect for Erin O'Toole, who had this file previously. And I know that they came to a place where there was some resolution, and of course with the election, and things go on, and I was chatting with a gentleman earlier, and he was saying when you're in government, things change as governments change, and but I have to say this, is that I don't think there's one person in this room that isn't thoroughly appalled with the way this whole thing has been handled. And, you know, when we talk about how we treat our veterans, and yesterday, you know, all of us came out to pay respect to all of the veterans that we've lost over the years, and some that are still fighting. And it really is a sober reminder that we have an obligation and a responsibility to ensure that our veterans are taken care of. And this is a fundamental principle of who we are as Canadians, and there's no doubt about that. And I know that as it stands right now, as we sit in opposition, we are continuing to push this file to resolution. I know that there is work going on currently, and I have to say this, and I know that, you know, there's many people in this room from many stripes that belong to this organization that believe in every step of the way the fight that is undertaken in the courts, and we want it to come to a resolution where our veterans are taken care of, and that is a fact. And we will continue to do that. We will continue to push. We'll continue to make sure that there is a resolution to this, and it's a satisfactory resolution. But I also want to really thank the directors and the past directors, the advisory council for Equitas, and everybody that's been involved, because it's been, like I said, parties from every stripe that have come together on this issue, because we believe so much that it needs to be resolved. So we will continue, and I will continue on behalf of your Member of Parliament to ensure that this continues to move forward. And if a court battle is undertaken, then we need to make sure, as I hear it is going to be again back in court, that it is up to all of us to make sure that there are funds available to go to court and make sure that our veterans are well represented. And I will work on both sides of that to push it from the House of Commons, and to also work and make sure that that people are aware of what's going on and what we need to be doing to come to a resolution. So I want to thank all of you. I know you're all volunteers, and this is your heart and passion to make sure that this comes to a resolution. So I thank you very much for that. And I know, as I said before, everyone in this room wants a resolution, and we want the right resolution. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Diana. I'd like to now call up Brian McKenna to introduce our featured speaker this evening. Brian.
Good evening. So I'm Brian, and I'm going to talk to you for a couple minutes here about two things. So first of all, as I come up here, probably a couple faces up there going, oh, what's this guy got to say? And then there's the people that have been around saying, oh God, they gave McKenna the mic again. Right? So two things. So I'm certainly going to introduce Mark Campbell. But I do want to take a second here to talk about the non-political nature of getting this done, even though we sometimes need a political side to it. So I came to your office, Ms. Sims, in 2011. I come back from Afghanistan. I was having some trouble with Veterans Affairs, lots of trouble. They wouldn't even acknowledge receiving my file for a number of months, let alone deal with it. And I remember dealing with your staff, and they said you were out, so I explained it to them. And then you popped into the office, so I talked to you for a bit. I remember it was the shortest conversation you ever have with a politician, but I'd said, I've never voted NDP. I'm a conservative, but I need your help. And then you made those calls, and then I started receiving calls from the department, so thanks for doing your job. Yeah, back in 2011. And that's kind of how this needs to go. So I'm going to introduce Mark Campbell here. So for those of you that don't know, when you're a major in the infantry, that essentially means that the Canadian government has decided that 100 plus of your fellow citizens are going under his command. And that's in Canada. And then when we send a guy to be in charge of that size force overseas, and they're actually working with the Afghan military, so not only do they trust him with 100 plus Canadian lives and multi-millions of dollars of equipment, they find him capable enough to bridge the gap of dealing with an enemy while dealing with another friendly force such as the Afghan army. So I'll leave that part to you to figure out, but let's just say as a soldier, the government knew that Mark Campbell's a very capable man. So how I know Mark is not in service. We've done some work since then, and so I'll highlight two things. Mark will talk to you about his own experience, but it's not hard for us to all look at Mark and see that there's been a catastrophic change in his life that happened during service. But what does he bring up when we're in Ottawa? He's the guy that says, okay, but what about the families? Okay, great, but what about the spouses? And when they're presenting the things that are going to be out there for the soldiers, the major is sitting there saying, okay, well, how does this affect the private? What's the private going to get? How are we going to look after them? So that's the guy you're about to hear from. He's a guy that Canada thought worthy enough to command 100 of your citizens. Canada found him worthy enough to do that while in combat working with the Afghan army. And now that he's sustained injuries himself, he's looking, as we're in Ottawa, who's going to help the spouses and what's going to happen to make a private's life better. So that's Mark Campbell. Mark, please.
That works. We're on Facebook Live on Veteran Guerrilla Radio, by the way. Everyone say hello to all the troops across Canada. We get about 5,000 viewers for every episode we do. So, hey, everybody. There you guys go.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. Thanks very much for the introduction, Brian. Sincerely appreciate that. When I was talking to Jim about what the topic would be tonight, I thought the natural topic should be the importance of the Equitas case, but I think we're all aware of the importance, and I will speak to that. But Jim said, Mark, why don't you just tell everybody your story?
How the hell is
And
this
we'll
thing
try to
working?
put a face on the case, as it were.
There we go.
So that's what I'm going to do this evening, and I won't dwell a long time on my history and take you lockstep through my career or anything like that. That's not the intent. The intent is just to give you an idea of one representative veteran and how our lives have changed as a result of our experiences overseas. So with that, I'll keep it simple. I was born in 1964 to my mom and dad, Lynn and Doug, who are pictured up on the upper left. As you can see on the right, I always had an affinity for things military and a love of things military. Don't know where it started from. There was nothing in the family. There's no tradition in the family of service, national service. But for some reason, I was struck with things military, and that pretty much followed me throughout my entire life. So by the time I hit 13 years old, I was eligible for Army Cadets, and I immediately joined the Army Cadets, 2422 Canadian Scottish Army Cadet Corps on Vancouver Island. I grew up in Nanaimo. That was quickly followed. I served 6 years, or 3 years in the cadets, and then as soon as I was able to, I transferred over to which is the Canadian Scottish Regiment that serves on Vancouver Island. And I served 6 years with the Canadian Scottish Regiment, from private recruit through to sergeant in the infantry, which put me in very good stead when I made a decision to more or less pursue a full-time career in the regular forces, in the regular Army, and did so in 1986. Around this time, I met the love of my life, Donna, who's here with me this evening, and hopefully most of you will have an opportunity to meet her.
Donna has been my rock throughout my entire life. We've been married 26 years, going on 27. But more importantly, since I've been injured, Donna has been there for me in a huge way. And a lot of the time, that family support that's not only welcome but necessary for the injured doesn't get recognized. And it's key, it's critical. That family support is critical to recovery. It's critical to moving forward in life. And Donna has given me that. And for that, I'm forever in her debt. So I decided to join the regular Army in 1986, and I tried a few civilian jobs just to ensure that the Army was really what I wanted to do with my life. And I wasn't a very good store detective, and I didn't like building houses in December and muddy ditches up to my waist. So instead I joined the regular Army infantry and dug the muddy ditches up to my waist, but different circumstance. So I joined 1986, went through a year and a half of training, and then I was posted to my first operational unit, which was the 2nd Battalion of Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry in Winnipeg, then, now Shiloh, in summer of 1988. Along with learning to command a platoon of 30 soldiers and with all the equipment and the armored personnel carriers and so on and so forth, the Army gave me some special skills like jumping out of airplanes, and which isn't particularly difficult. It's the landing part that's the tricky issue. They taught me that, and that came in quite handy later when I joined my final unit, which was a light infantry, airborne light infantry unit. Dawn and I were married in, geez, help me out here, honey. 1989. I always want to say 1990. 1989 we were married, and that was immediately before I went off to my first operational tour overseas, which was Cyprus in 1990. And I deployed to Cyprus in March of 1990, came back in around September. And it was an interesting tour. It was classic peacekeeping in the conventional sense that everybody sort of pictures in their minds when they think of peacekeeping. We had the Greek Cypriots on one side and the Turkish Cypriots backed by the Turkish National Army on the other side. They'd agreed to stop fighting for quite some time at that point in 1990. The Turks had invaded in 1974. So this peacekeeping deal had been going on for quite some time when I arrived there in 1990, and things were very stable. At most, people would get upset on one side or the other when one side or the other would raise their flag a half-inch higher in the middle of the night in the dark, or they would put an extra sandbag in a window, or somehow mess with the status quo. That's all it was status quo, and it was like kids squabbling with us in the middle on what we called the green line. But it was an interesting exposure to overseas operations. Classic peacekeeping, which doesn't really exist in the world anymore. There's really nowhere that we have people deployed with the permission of both sides to be there, other than perhaps some areas of the Middle East. So that was Cyprus, 6 months, a bit of a holiday in the sun. After that, Don and I were posted out. We went to Regina for 3 years, and I did a staff job. You do 3 years in the unit, working with soldiers, and then 3 years out was kind of the deal. And it just continued in that sort of cycle. So we did 3 years out, and then we went back to Winnipeg with the 2nd Battalion of the PPCLI, and I had more important jobs, more high-profile jobs within the unit. And in 1996, we had our son, Stephen. In 1997, he was 6 months old. I deployed on my second overseas tour to Bosnia in 1997. And overseas for about 7 months in Bosnia. Different experience again, because now we were doing peace enforcement or peacemaking. And we had 3 sides in that particular war in the former Yugoslavia, and none of them had agreed to necessarily stop fighting. What had happened was, for humanitarian reasons, the international community had imposed a ceasefire on the 3 sides and come up with what they called the Dayton Accords. And it was our job there to basically enforce the Dayton Accords and keep the 3 sides from picking on one another. So peace enforcement, and we had fighter jets and everything else to back us up. We were armed, as you can see, no blue berets. We wielded the big stick, and the three opposing forces did what we told them to do, or we would bring the big stick down on their heads. And that's how we made the peace in the former Yugoslavia. And it was a success by all accounts. Peace reigns there today. After Bosnia, Don and I were posted out again for 3 years on a staff job. This time we were posted to Edmonton. I went into Land Force Western Area Headquarters, which was the Army headquarters responsible for the Army of the West, from Thunder Bay west to the coast. Did that job for a couple of years, and then I was the executive assistant to the commanding general of Western Area. And then I got my dream posting and went back to an operational unit, this time to the 3rd Battalion of the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, which is a light infantry battalion. It doesn't have the armored personnel carriers that the other 2 infantry battalions of the PPCLI have. It has parachutes and heavy rucksacks and lots of mountains to climb around on. And that's what we did in the 3rd Battalion. So that parachuting stuff actually started to come in handy. Around that time, we had our daughter, Megan, in 1999. They're 3 years apart, Stephen and Megan. And you can see Stephen got a bit of a military bone in his body back when he was a youngster, but I think he's grown out of that now. And take us to the next one, which brought us up to 2001, 9/11. And immediately after 9/11, it was my unit, because we were the high readiness unit in Canada for deployment. My unit, 3rd Battalion, was the one selected very quickly to deploy to Afghanistan for the first tour in January through to August of 2002. Very interesting tour. No question about it. It was a combat mission. Our job over there, we were embedded with an American brigade of the 101st Airborne Division, with all of their helicopters and all of their combat power. And we became, our battalion or battle group became the 4th maneuver element within that American brigade. They brought us in, treated us just like brothers and sisters, and away we went to war together. The job was very different. It was chasing an enemy on the run. The Al-Qaeda had already been essentially routed, and they were fleeing and various what they perceived to be safe havens along the border with Pakistan that they could scoot across if the pressure got too hot. And so what we did was we did a series of combat air assaults, 3 in total, what we called away missions, where we would go and conduct a battalion level air mobile combat assault into the first one, the Shai-Cod Valley, at the end of a big American operation called Operation Anaconda. We did another one into Tora Bora, which you may have heard of, which was Osama bin Laden's last stand in Afghanistan, as it were. We were there after the American Special Forces had been there on a bombing campaign, looking to rout out the final elements of Al-Qaeda. They'd already scooted across the border, which we could see from where we were. But a very interesting mission being embedded with the Americans and seeing how they do business, and a very interesting mission having all the apprehensions of combat, but very little actual combat. Because the enemy was on the run, our chances of actually finding him and engaging him were slim to none. Our snipers got some action with the Americans during Operation Anaconda, but for the rest of us, other than 1 or 2 little enemy outposts that we took care of rather handily, there wasn't a lot of enemy contact on that operation, on that deployment. We had so much combat power at our disposal, with the Americans backing us up with all their helicopters and artillery and everything else. The bad guys knew that they couldn't stand and fight us, so they ran away to Pakistan very quickly. The Taliban kind of just were the Afghans allied with the Al-Qaeda, or at least loosely allied with Al-Qaeda. They just kind of slunk away into the background and mixed into the background of Afghan society. While the Americans and while the NATO combat power was there, particularly in the south around Kandahar. So that was a good mission, combat mission, offensive operations for the most part. Although we did our stints in the wire, defending the airfield as well. But overall, what I would call a good deployment. We lost 4 soldiers on that deployment due to U.S. friendly fire from an F-16, which you're probably familiar with. And we lost Sergeant Mark Leger, Ricky Green, Ainsworth Dyer, and Ricky Smith. And unfortunate, but things happen, and accidents happen, and friendly fire is one of those, unfortunately, frequent accidents that happens in combat. Just show you a little clip about that first tour in Afghanistan. It might give you some better idea of the sites and some of the sites and things that we saw there. Hopefully this will run, or not. We may not get our movie.
Where's our tech guy?
Matthew, any hope on that?
I don't know what's
I don't know. Oops. Help me out here. We'll go previous. This is the previous slide. Can you get that to play? Okay, well, we're not going to belabor the point. That's okay.
Try one more. Hit it again with that cursor.
Just not gonna go. That's fine. That's all right. We'll carry on. Sorry, no movies. Well, if we can get them going later, we'll show them. So after that first tour in Afghanistan, I came home. I was stationed in Gagetown, New Brunswick, to teach at what we call our tactics school for 3 years, and then stationed back to Edmonton, where I served in a number of roles, and eventually ended up being the acting commanding officer of my battalion while my commanding officer was away overseas himself. I was the deputy commanding officer of the 3rd Battalion, and in that role, had a great tour. And then in 2007, I got wind of an opening in what they called the Operational Mentoring and Liaison Team over in Afghanistan, which was the people we had embedded with the Afghan National Army, providing them on-the-job training and combat. I thought that would be a fascinating way to end my career, to go over and actually embed within the Afghan culture and experience the Afghan culture, as well as participating in combat operations, which I trained my entire adult life to do, but hadn't yet really had the opportunity to take part in. So after a great family respite in New Brunswick for 3 years, where the kids were starting school, back to Edmonton and back into the grind. This time, Operation Athena in Afghanistan, February to August of 2008, a fantastic tour. I didn't have hundreds of troops under my command on this one. In fact, I had only 27 soldiers all up, including myself, officers, and NCMs. I had 4 subordinate teams, each of which worked with an Afghan company of about 70 Afghans. And I provided advice and mentoring guidance to the Afghan lieutenant colonel who was in charge of the Afghan battalion, which comprised the 4 companies. They weren't really ready for battalion level operations, so I spent a lot of my time out on the ground with my company teams, doing company level operations, providing top cover for my guys. The bottom line is, if you have subordinates in the field in combat, you have to accept risk, and you have to demonstrate that you're willing to accept risk alongside your subordinates, or you have no right to command them. So I was out there providing top cover for my guys. When we got into contact, I would take care of things like artillery and fast aircraft so that my guys could focus on the close fight on the ground. And that was really my job, as well as providing an extra set of Canadian rifles and Canadian medical training, because my guys were operating in very small teams with groups of Afghans, well in front of what you would have seen on the news in terms of all the Canadians with all the Canadian gear and the armored personnel carriers and the helicopters and all that good stuff. We had none of that. We operated well out in front, light, on our feet, living out of a rucksack, knapsack. But a fascinating experience. I was at the pinnacle of my career, having the time of my life. You can see the feasts that they put on. We did everything with the Afghans except pray with them, pretty much. We ate with them, we fought with them. None of my soldiers fortunately died with them, but we certainly got wounded alongside them. My group of 27 had over 25% casualties over the course of our 6-month tour. It was arguably the most dangerous job in the most dangerous location in the most dangerous country in the world. So that's what it was like. And it was interesting because the Taliban had undergone quite a resurgence between about 2005, 2006, into that time frame, 2007. They were still on the upswing because the Americans had pulled out all of their combat power from Afghanistan to undergo their adventure in Iraq. And that left us kind of holding the ball, as Jim alluded to, in southern Afghanistan, where the Taliban were resurgent because that's their homeland. And I was stationed in Panjwai, which is the actual birthplace of the Taliban. So we had our hands full. We didn't have a whole lot of Canadians there. There were only 2,000 of us. But realistically, outside the wire, doing the actual job of prosecuting combat operations, there were probably only 600-700 guys at a time, if that. And of course, our Afghan allies. Unfortunately, I got another movie here. I don't know if it's going to play for you or not. Probably not. So we'll just carry on. Sorry about that. So I'll talk to you now about what happened to me when I got injured. This operation was the 4th day of 6 days of continuous combat operations, and our job was to disrupt the Taliban by going into a series of villages and clearing these villages in an area called Sia Choi. Just to orient you, this is the Organdab River, which splits Zari District and Panjwai District, running roughly northeast to southwest in Afghanistan. And it's a predominantly dry riverbed. You can actually walk across or drive across. But it's also a very exposed killing zone for anybody who happens to be waiting on the other side of the river. On the other side of the river, we had an area called, a series of villages called Sia Choi, collectively. And our job, the day that I was hit, was to clear this village, well, cross the river, supported by one of our Canadian platoons, cross the river, establish an attack position here, go in, leading with the Afghans, clear the village, protected by another Canadian platoon to our north, and Canadian reconnaissance, a screen consisting of 2 detachments, a reconnaissance section out in front of us, providing warning. What happened on that day was after some contact with reconnaissance getting across the river, they got established in front of us. Call sign 2-3 got established to the north of us in a blocking position to prevent the enemy from coming at us this way and protecting our northern flank so that we could come in and clear around this village. We cleared the village. I had some film there for you, but it was basically, it wasn't an IED manufacturing facility. It was a drug processing facility. So lots of marijuana, lots of poppy husk and things like that. We just ignored that kind of thing. It wasn't our role to eradicate. We had no active role in doing that. So we just carried on. And what had happened is we had finished clearing this village, and the omelet with one company of, or 2 companies, sorry, of Afghan National Army were in an all-round defense here. And what happened was right around, we were having lunch, getting ready to stage into here. Before we could go into the next village, what had to happen was the reconnaissance element had to move and establish themselves on the far side. And the Canadian platoon defending us to the north flank had to move and reposition over in this vicinity somewhere to protect our north flank as we went in and cleared this village. Unfortunately, what happened was, as we were having lunch here, getting ready to launch, call sign 2-3 was picking up and getting ready to move into their next location when they got into a serious tick, or troops in contact, a firefight. Big battle raging here. Canadian sergeant got shot through the arm and the leg, and Sergeant Corcoran was going to die. He was going into shock if they couldn't get him out. The problem is, when you're embroiled in a firefight, it takes about an entire platoon to get one casualty on a stretcher out, because you need 3 teams of 4 rotating on the stretcher itself, because a guy weighs 300 pounds with all of his ammunition and everything. So you got to rotate the guys every 50 yards carrying the stretcher, because it's 55 degrees Celsius out. And then you need a ring of soldiers around you, providing all-around protection, 360 degrees, because the enemy will come at you from any direction he can find a weakness or a chink in your armor. And then you need an outer sort of cordon or a blocking position to ideally identify where the enemy is going to come at you and to block him to prevent the evacuation of the casualty from being messed with. So it's quite a process just to get one guy out of there. So in order for 2-3 to get their casualty from where they were here down to a helicopter landing site somewhere secure in the river, it was going to take the entire platoon. They had to break contact. The only way they can break contact is if somebody else takes over the fight. We're the only other guys in the neighborhood. So what we immediately did was gave up what had been a very deliberate lockstep operation with lots of security, and we immediately transitioned into what's called an advance to contact. We turned right and we steamed 400 meters north into an arresting position. Where am I here? Into a resting position here. So we turned and we went north, and we paused just before we thought we would make contact with 2-3. And where we paused happened to be an enemy ambush. And we'd just gone to ground, we'd just gone firm. They gave us time, and we didn't figure out until later why they gave us time. But we managed to get set. And the Afghans were all in defensive positions in a 360-degree all-around circle when the enemy finally initiated his ambush. And what happened was, I was off to the side of my headquarters, and I was talking on the radio and looking at my map, telling my sergeant major, who was with the lead platoon, to slow down, get organized, because you don't want to run pell-mell into a fight. You want to be organized when you get there. Unfortunately, I finished talking on the radio, walked around a wall to rejoin my own headquarters, and as I walked over a certain patch of dirt, the enemy in a grape hut several hundred meters away with eyes on saw me, walk across that spot and triggered an improvised explosive device underneath my left foot. That explosion creates all kinds of noise, confusion, dust, screaming, yelling, and then they hit us simultaneously from 3 sides with rocket-propelled grenades and machine guns. From here, here, and here, well, we were in a circle here. 2-3 was still fighting over here, although these guys quit fighting 2-3 and came over and reinforced and joined the ambush that we were in. In my case, I got my left leg immediately vaporized. It was gone. I flew through the air. I remember orange light. I remember heat on my backside, and I landed on the ground with a big oof because my armor plates and all my ammunition basically knocked the wind out of me. I was on my back. I had mud in my eyes. I was trying to wipe the mud out. I thought that we'd been hit by an RPG. I thought somebody had launched a rocket-propelled grenade into my headquarters. That wasn't the case. It was an improvised explosive device. It took off my left leg, and it injured 3 other individuals who were proximate to me at the time. I tried to sit up, and I couldn't sit up because I didn't have the weight on my lower body anymore to allow me to do that and counteract all the weight on my chest. So instead, both legs came up. My left leg was gone, basically above the knee, as you see it here, with blood spurting out of the femoral artery. My right leg was pretty much gone around the knee. It was just hanging on by a few threads of tissue. Sorry, I know we just had dinner. And the femoral artery was going as well. So I knew that I only had a couple minutes to live. It was a bit of a shock actually seeing that. But the pain hadn't hit yet, so I managed to get a tourniquet off my vest, but I didn't get it on my leg. I yelled out to the guys, "Hey guys, I'm hit," or something to that effect. They got my legs, and to their credit, the soldiers were magnificent. They piled onto me under fire the whole time. It is, excuse my French, but it's a shit show. There is stuff flying everywhere, grenades, bombs going off, bullets whizzing all over the place. But the guys were great. They got up under fire. They got onto me. They got 2 tourniquets on each leg to stop the bleeding. That's what it took. The pain was excruciating. I've never felt agony like that in my life. I hope I never will again. But it was the tourniquets, not the missing limbs. It was the tourniquets that they had clamped down so tight on my legs to stop the bleeding. The pain was indescribable. I couldn't have any painkiller because my blood pressure was low, so I had to just suck it up for about 90 minutes. It took to evacuate us out of there. My medic kept me alive. I was starting to tank because of blood pressure. He put a thing called rescue flow into me, which fools the body into thinking that you've got your normal blood pressure. So he saved my life. The troops saved my life by putting the tourniquets on. My medic saved my life with the rescue flow. And then, of course, the surgeons worked their magic when I finally got to Kandahar. We fought a fighting withdrawal out of here. It was actually quite a textbook operation run by one of my warrant officers who was trained to conduct company-level operations. And what we did was we left my sergeant major with one of the platoons, and they conducted a series of blocking positions where the enemy did circle around and try to attack us as we withdrew down this dotted line to the helicopter landing site. Remember, they're carrying me on a stretcher. There's 3 other wounded guys. They've got the bubble, then they've got the outer bubble, and the outer bubble is actually moving in a series of blocking positions to stop the enemy from striking us in the flanks as we move down the dotted trail to the HLS. We got back to the helicopter landing site. Like I say, it took about 90 minutes over hill and dale, through ditches, irrigation ditches, on a crazy carpet stretcher. Over hill and dale, one guy carrying my leg, or what was left of my right leg. We got to the helicopter landing site. It was secured by the reconnaissance guys, and we had overwatch from call sign 24 and their light armored vehicles on the far riverbank, so this area was secure. The enemy didn't really try to bug us much past this line here. We dropped a bunch of artillery and smoke to seal the deal so that we could get away clean. Helicopter came in, lifted me away. Once the helicopter arrived, I knew I was 20 minutes from surgery. So I knew if I could just hang on that long, I'd be good to go. The Americans had brilliant pararescue guys, PJs they call them, paramedics, basically airborne paramedics who looked after me during the flight. We landed in Kandahar. They immediately whisked me into the surgical hospital, and I promptly died on the operating table because the minute they put me out, my body just said, "All right, enough," and shut her down. Right or wrong, good or bad, they brought me back with the paddles, so here I am today. I stayed in Kandahar for about a week. I was in an induced coma for 5 days, and they did that because my lungs were damaged from the blast, and they had to intubate me in order to have enough oxygen in my system. They flew me to Germany. I spent 2 weeks in Germany, a week in the best intensive care unit in the world in Landstuhl, and then a week in the general ward, waiting for my lungs to regenerate the oxygen exchange capacity so that I could actually fly home. After 2 weeks in Germany, I flew home. They flew the family over to Germany to be with me while I was there. They do that in cases where they think you might not make it. And if there's time, they'll bring the family over and you know, if nothing else, have an opportunity to say goodbye. I was in and out of consciousness quite a bit during this time, but essentially I underwent a series of surgeries in Germany to stabilize my wounds and to clean out as much of the Afghan dirt and grunge as they could. And then once I was back in Canada, I was whisked to the University of Alberta Hospital in Edmonton, where I underwent about a dozen surgeries over 2 months, including dressing changes and so on and so forth. It was a long time. I was drugged up pretty hard. It was very difficult and hard for Donna, obviously, and the children, as well as my own parents, who were able to come and see me in the hospital. But I was there for 2 months, underwent all those surgeries, and then I was sent to the Glenrose Rehab Hospital in Edmonton, which is one of the best in the country. Rather primitive in terms of equipment, but first rate cutting edge in terms of staff and their skills, and that's really what the key is there. So I underwent 2 months in the Glenrose Rehab in August, starting in August and September of 2008, sorry. I was doing 2 physio sessions a day, physiotherapy sessions, 5 days a week for 8 weeks. I had prosthetics fitting and training. Prosthetics didn't work out for me because my left leg was so mangled. I can't get a comfortable fit. So I'm pretty much confined to a wheelchair. So I learned wheelchair skills, which, yeah, I can sit here and balance for 10 minutes if you really want to watch. But I also learned to do things like self-catheterization, which is rather unpleasant, and self-injections for blood thinners, which carried on for several months. Mental health, I had some mental health issues. And that included dealing with my medications, trying to get my pain medications at the right level. They were all over the map, and I was in a lot of pain a lot of the time, and learning pain management skills. I want to talk about the impact on the family while we're here. This is just me undergoing some of the rehab. The impact on the family is huge. You know, it begins with a dreaded knock on the door in the middle of the night. That causes extreme anxiety, bewilderment, uncertainty about the future. Donna had to go on half days at work through the period June to August so that she could visit me in the hospital in the afternoons. She was obviously distracted and stressed, trying to work half days. The household suffered incredibly, obviously. The kids were distraught. Their school grades plummeted. My son Stephen required a tutor. Everybody required mental health counseling. It was just incredible stress. And when I came home, the stress was even worse. I was discharged from the Glenrose Hospital at the end of September 2008, and it was just a nightmare at home. The Army had let us down and had not completed the necessary conversions to our home, renovations to our home for me to be discharged. So I was initially discharged on a hospital bed that was situated in our living room in our downstairs of our home. The only bathroom I could use in the home was upstairs in the ensuite off our master bedroom, and I had to use 2 stair glides with a balancing act in between stair glides to get there. So I had to plan my urination about 15 minutes out. And you can imagine number 2. Donna tried to hold together working a full-time job in the Army, working a full-time job, looking after me, which I was essentially like another newborn in the family, and then looking after the kids and the household and everything else. And it just couldn't happen. It was 10 pounds stuffed into a 5-pound bag, and Donna eventually came about this close to a mental breakdown, emotional breakdown. And it was predominantly because the military was not coming through the way they were supposed to, and the way that they had said they would, in terms of getting the home sorted out, in terms of supporting us, not financially, but supporting us with everything from vehicle conversions to proper bed. I just went on and on and on. It was a bit of a nightmare. The Director of Casualty Support Management in the Canadian Forces was working very hard, but like everyone else during the war, they were understaffed and overworked, And unfortunately, what that did was it really let down the casualties, because we didn't belong to Veterans Affairs at that time. All of us were extended between 3 and 5 years in order to get our lives and our injuries sorted out before we were released from the military. But it was during those 5 years that the military kind of really let us down in some instances. In other cases, like the Soldier On program, which is pictured there, the military was brilliant and they nailed it. They took a charity that a search and rescue technician had started, and they made it an official Canadian Armed Forces program. And it's a brilliant program. If anything helped me through my physical rehab, it was the Soldier On program, which exposed me to sports camps, taught me to sit ski, learned to, got a chance to try sledge hockey. They bought me a hand crank bicycle, which I have at home. We got to participate in the opening ceremony for the 2010 Paralympics, which you see there in the bottom right-hand corner. Just a brilliant program for giving you back your self-confidence, your self-esteem, your sense of self-worth, and your physical prowess. Learning to sit ski again was a big deal for me because I mastered a new skill, and I was still able to ski, maybe not upright like I had skied alpine, but I was still able to ski, and I was able to ski with my kids, and I was able to ski with Donna, and it was a wonderful thing. But I tell you, the impact on the family was tremendous. And the problem was there was very little there to support the family, because it was all about the injured soldier to the extent that D&D was capable of looking after us, but there was really very little thought given to the families and what the families themselves were going through and what support mechanisms they might need. On top of all this, I was a really bad husband, and I started drinking even when I was in the Glenrose Hospital. I could look out my window in the Glenrose, and unfortunately there was a liquor store right across the road. So as soon as I was mobile in my wheelchair, there I went. First thing I did, because the meds still didn't have my pain under control, and the only thing that was working was liquor. And I tell you, when the lights went out at 8 o'clock at night in the Glenrose, I was the only guy in the ward under about 65 years of age, because everybody there was a diabetes-related amputation. There was nobody there that I could relate to. There was nobody there that I could talk to about what I was going through. And the lights went out at 8 o'clock at night, and you just sat there and thought. And all you could do was think about how screwed up things were, what a burden you were going to be, and how life was ruined for you and your family. And so I started drinking in the hospital. They found out about it. They only withheld my meds once. They were really good about it. But, it got worse. And when I got home, it got even worse. And it was to the point where I always had a bottle in my backpack. And everywhere I went, I was drinking. And I was doing interviews drunk. It was a nightmare. I was a mess, total mess. And it hadn't stopped. And around 2010, about 2 years after I started my downward spiral with the alcohol, between Dawn and myself, we decided enough was enough, and off I went to Sunshine Coast Health Center and got myself sorted out. And that was a life changer. It really did give me my life back. And they didn't do a 12-step program. They just taught you that you were the author of your own novel, your own life. And it is what you write. It is what you make it. And I decided to make it something worthwhile. So I stopped drinking for the most part. I'll still have a social beer now and again, but that craziness is all in the past, and it all stopped, which was a good thing. So today I have an active lifestyle for the most part. A lot of it conducted with the assistance of the Canadian Forces and volunteer organizations, our friends and family. Soldier On, as I said, the Fitness and Adaptive Sports Clinic, co-aligned with the Canadian Paralympic Association. Brilliant opportunity that's offered to young injured soldiers. The Vet Ski Festival, which they hold in Vancouver Island, Mount Washington, actually has one of the best adaptive snow sports organizations, volunteers, in Canada. So that was brilliant. Went down to Triathlon Clinic in San Antonio with the U.S. Army, where they have their huge Center for the Intrepid for their amputees and burn victims, and so on. I got involved in Project Healing Waters, which is rehabilitation through fly fishing, another great organization. Friends of mine took me hunting, because I was a hunter in the past. So we hunted bear in the spring, deer, elk, antelope, moose in the fall. And I'm still active in target shooting, which allows me to put my gun collection to use. So life today. Life today is really all about, for the most part, the family. That's the focus. That and volunteer work. Volunteer work for me is a means to engage with the broader community in matters of interest to disabled veterans. That's obviously my focus. That's what rules my life every waking moment, is my disability. to a certain extent. I'm heavily involved in veterans advocacy. Some of you might have seen me on the news once or twice or heard me on the radio. I did a lot of that on my own for about the first 2-3 years after I was injured, before Equitas actually came to be. And I'll tell you, it was a lot of work. We had a lot of reporters and whatnot through the house, but I had a great deal of difficulty getting the appropriate message out through the media. They wanted to see me feed the dog. They wanted to show me washing dishes on TV. They didn't want to talk about the issues. And the issues were the new Veterans Charter and what had been done to reduce our disability compensation by 40% in the middle of the war without bothering to tell any of us who were fighting the war. So we found out about the reduction in compensation when we were lying in our hospital beds, getting used to the fact that we were missing limbs. And that's how we were taught. I was a senior officer in the Army. I didn't know that the new Veterans Charter was a ripoff the way it was. We were all told, new charter, got to be better than the old one, carry on. So that's what we did. And we all marched off to war thinking that we had our backs covered, like we'd always been told, if you get hurt, don't worry, the people of Canada have your back, the government has your back, only to find out when we did finally get wounded after 2006, guess what? You missed the magic date, and you're screwed. And it wasn't a very good feeling, let me tell you. The sense of betrayal that I felt after serving now, well, at the end of it, 32 years in uniform in the service of Canada, only to be left hanging, and my family, more importantly, left hanging in our hour of need. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming. I mean, I had a hard time mentally getting over that hurdle. I was very, very, very angry for a long, long time. Not so much anymore. But the veteran advocacy thing became a lot easier with the advent of Equitas. And once I threw my hat into the ring with Equitas, all of a sudden we had a purpose, and people started listening. And that's one of the fundamental differences that Equitas has made. The organization, having an organization, bringing people with common thoughts together, that's what's really made the difference. I provided testimony to the Senate Subcommittee on the inadequacy of the new Veterans Charter. I've got my ongoing engagement with Equitas as one of the 6 plaintiffs, as well as some related media stuff, and ongoing involvement. I'm a member of the Minister's Policy Advisory Group, so I advise the Minister of Veterans Affairs along with a dozen other folks on matters of policy, including the return or the promised return to full-time or to lifetime pensions for veterans if they choose to have one. So it's interesting because there's a bit of a dichotomy there. On one side, my loyalty lies with Equitas and the lawsuit against the government. On the other hand, I'm actually working with the government and working with the minister, trying to move the markers down the field to make the lawsuit unnecessary. So it's a bit of a balancing act, but so far it's worked out well. It's allowed me to be an Equitas spy in the minister's office. And at the same time, it's allowed me to do some good works with the minister. We have made some progress. There have been baby steps, with bigger steps hopefully to follow. Also been involved in things like Valor Place. You have Valor House here in Vancouver. We have a Valor Place in Edmonton. I became the poster boy for Valor Place and did a bunch of media stuff with that, public speaker, fundraiser for that. I also volunteered with the Hunting Heroes program, which was an Alberta initiative to coordinate and link disabled soldiers, and the Soldier On program with various Alberta outdoors outfitters for those who are interested in hunting or pursuing a hunt with their new disability. So various volunteer opportunities have come and gone, and I expect there'll be more in the future. Certainly, veterans, working for the interests of veterans, and particularly disabled veterans, is huge for me personally. As Brian alluded to, I'm really concerned about the young guys, not so much myself. Financially, I'm okay. It's the young guys that are pegged at $47,000 a year for the rest of their lives with no hope of earning more, that have to get married, raise kids, and send them to school. How are you going to do that on $47,000 a year in Canada today? You can't do it, or you can't do it very well. So I want to see those young guys taken care of, so they at least have the opportunity to have a middle-class lifestyle like the rest of the average Canadian society. I want to talk now about briefly about the importance of Equitas. I'm convinced personally that Equitas has been the lever that brought the Government of Canada to heel regarding the need for action on the veterans file. I'm absolutely convinced that Equitas has been the lever that moved the elephant. It's been largely responsible for all the Conservative government concessions prior to the election in 2015, where they trotted out some what we call low-hanging fruit or window dressing. Wasn't quite enough, but it was a start. And it showed the intent. For the first time, the Minister of Veterans Affairs and the Government of Canada finally admitted that there was a problem, and that in fact there was a financial disparity between the new Veterans Charter and the former Pension Act. And it took them a long time to come to grips and admit that. And it was Minister O'Toole who did that, and I got to give him credit for that. I think Equitas was largely responsible for the content of the Prime Minister's mandate letter to the Minister of Veterans Affairs, with the 16 action items, the 16 promises, including reinstatement of lifetime pensions for the disabled. And I'm also convinced that Equitas has been largely responsible for all the gains that we've made to date under the new Liberal government. The earnings loss benefit for those who can't have a gainful civilian job or career has been increased from 75% of your former salary to 90% of your former salary. Not a huge amount, but it means a lot to us because it indicates movement. There's been movement. The disability award, which is the much maligned lump sum, has been increased from, it was $260,000 originally. It crept up over time with cost of living adjustments. So it's just over $300,000. It's now pegged at $360,000, which is the maximum settlement that the courts provide for pain and suffering associated with injury. So we've now achieved parity with the civil courts, which was one of the fundamental purposes of Equitas, as far as pain and suffering is concerned. So we have made some gains, and I think those gains, again, come back to Equitas, because Equitas is the hammer hanging over the government, forcing it to do the right thing and take action. I'm not saying the government wouldn't take action if it weren't for Equitas, but I don't think we would be seeing the same degree of action, and I don't think we'd be seeing, although it feels glacial, I don't think we'd be seeing the same focus and speed of action that's actually starting to pick up as we proceed in the Minister's office. Equitas provides a source of hope above and beyond moving the government. It provides a source of hope for individual veterans, myself included. I mean, Equitas is where we've hung our hats on Equitas. It's got to get us across the finish line, because if it doesn't, there's nothing behind it that's going to. But it's also a source of hope for veterans' families and their loved ones, the extended families, including hope for family-specific benefits, which we are proposing in the Minister's Policy Advisory Group to bring across from the former Pension Act to include now in the new Veterans Charter, because in the new Veterans Charter, they eliminated every single family benefit. So we're trying to bring those back in. But it's also a source of hope for the veterans community as a whole. It's a common rallying point. Equitas is all you hear when you go to Ottawa. All everybody talks about, the veterans talk about, is Equitas, Equitas, Equitas. Everybody is pinning their hopes and dreams on Equitas to set things right for Canada's disabled veterans. It's a big deal. It's a really, really big deal within the veterans community. It's shocking, actually, to run into it when you travel back east and so on. I'm going to pretty much leave things there. I don't want to carry on and bore you all to tears. Oops. I'm going the wrong way. Yeah. I guess the last thing I want to do really is, I'd be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity as one of the plaintiffs to thank everybody in this room. My personal thanks, as well as the thanks of my fellow veterans. You and the broader, I guess, online audience, for those that are watching, if Aaron's filming this.
He is.
Yeah, I mean, your support these past 6 years has been crucial to what success we've achieved now, and to the conditions that we have set for future success. And if it wasn't for the people in this room, we wouldn't be where we are in terms of getting the government to do the right thing by Canada's disabled veterans. So I just want to thank you very much. I'd like to publicly acknowledge and thank Don Sorokin and his legal team who couldn't be here tonight, Miller Thomson, for their hard work and their unwavering support to this point. And I really need to thank the Equitas volunteers who work behind the scenes to make events like this fundraiser such a success. That includes the Equitas leadership, Jim Scott, of course, as president and the Society Board of Directors, and all of you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for supporting the Equitas class action lawsuit. It means a great deal to me. I know it means a great deal to the other veterans in the room. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Can we get that out of the way?
I'm
sorry I left it there.
With respect to how important it is that we continue this fight. Mark has given real-life examples to tie in with those more boring legal issues that take place. You've given meaning and value. So, Mark, thank you and your family for providing us with that information.
Hey, everybody. Oh,
And sharing.
I accidentally dropped that. Hold on. So, troops, that was the show. So, if you can help us out, we've got a lot of shirts available. Right now, we have the older shirts and the new ones. So if you order $50 donation, it was $50. We'll get you 2 shirts. So you get an old one and the brand new one if you can make a donation. I'll kind of sneak in the back here.
I was close. Oh, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and Mark, thank you very much for a very moving presentation. I think far too often as Canadians, because we have been so fortunate as a country. So I think we're gonna wrap it up here, guys. Everybody, please try and share this far and wide. And I think it was a very thorough presentation of what's going on with the case, our history. And then we got to hear an excellent frickin' story about Mark, his career, his life, the combat operation of the day when he got injured. I think we all support him 110%. So again, please share this. Please make a donation online. Just go to equitassociety.ca, and we have the brand new shirt with the Honor of the Crown on the back. It says Honor of the Crown, 6 Afghanistan Veterans versus the Government of Canada. It's a pretty smart shirt. I'll show you it one more time here. That's the original ones. There you go. That's what it looks like. There's Brian. Brian's finally gonna get one on his hands on one or a bunch. Okay, so we're gonna shut her down. Brian, do you want to say anything?
Thanks for following, and thanks for watching today. And you don't get any better speakers than Mark Campbell.
That was a great show, guys. Talk to you soon. Love you.